Having one of these crazy mornings. How you doing? Well, we're going to get on up. What do you know about Ukraine? So I got that. What else? This is that. Chelsea. I've got a lot going on today, everybody. Hey, you guys, my morning stars, sending you much love.
I got the email. I'm going to start getting everything rolling. Okay, Santita?
Okay, if you can just get Pastor Brooks up as soon as possible, because I want to get to him as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Let me get that on right now, okay?
And then get the doctors up.
Oh, of course. You got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Stop it. You're a rock star. Stop it.
I appreciate you. I do. Is Matt okay?
I think so. Hopefully we hear from him in a little bit. I'll keep you posted of anything.
No one's heard from him? Oh, my gosh. I don't like that. I do not like that. No. He's a wonderful guy. All right, everybody. We got a whole lot to talk about today. Ukraine with Dr. Max Wolf and these rising gas prices, which started before Ukraine, to be quite frank with you. Let's be honest about that. It seems like, corporate profits are baked into the cake. I think we need to stay mindful of that. But we're going to be talking about the Anti-Lynching Bill that is really going to be one of the signature achievements of Congressman Bobby Rush's years in office and really years of service to making America a better place. And then we are going to be talking about Jesse Smallett. He is looking at, he goes to court today. Will he be sentenced to time or not? A lot of people want him to be able to, they want the court to grant him mercy. And remember, we had no cameras in the court, and his defense team accused the judge of actually trying to strike her.
Coming on in.
Coming in? Okay.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
And hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Mr. Mercado, thank you for getting me up today. Matt, God bless you. Matt Cummings and my whole team at WCPT. Love you so much. I am coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, praying for resolution to the strike. Put those teachers up there and all of the workers who deserve so much more than they are getting. Everybody. Working toward an equitable solution for the children, for the teachers, for the workers, for everybody who's in the school ecosystem. They're striking just outside of Chicago as well. Our educators and our education systems do not have enough. They just don't have enough. But there's no federal mandate, just so that you know, so that our children will be educated. No federal mandate. There is no constitutionally protected right to an education in the United States. There is no constitutionally protected right, no federally protected right for you to vote. Think about that today. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Dave, I hope you get warm up there in Edmonton, Canada. Oh, Edmonton, Alberta. That's about 18 degrees below 0 Celsius. Oh my gosh, God bless you. It's too much. And Samantha and Andre, it's gotten chilly here today. I want you to call me. We're going to be talking about the anti-lynching law. We're going to be talking about the underrepresentation of Black nurses. We will be talking about Jesse Smallett, and we will be talking about these rising gas prices. Yeah, we're going to be moving around today, but you all said you wanted to talk about a lot, so let's get right to it, everybody. Let's get to some of these headlines. Mr. Mercado, in Chicago, we're going to have a high of 29 degrees, snow showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 27 degrees, mostly sunny, though. The Bulls last night, well, they snapped this losing streak. Yay, 114 to 108 over the Pistons, and the Timberwolves keep on rolling. 132 to 102 over the Thunder. And, well, tonight, Chicago will be facing off against the New York Bruins, and the Wild will be facing off against the Red Wings. Well, Ukraine is still in the news. Ukraine's President Zelensky is repeating his call for NATO to establish a no-fly zone over the country following a series of Russian bomb attacks. Recent shelling hit a maternity and children's hospital in southern Ukraine, killing at least 3 people, including 1 child, the Mariupol City Council said today. The UN said it would follow up urgently and that healthcare facilities, hospitals, and healthcare workers should not ever, ever, ever be a target, everybody. But guess what happened on the state side? After yanking COVID relief, the House of Representatives late yesterday approved a $1.5 trillion government spending package that includes $782 billion with a B dollars in military funding, the largest portion of the must-pass omnibus legislation. What do you think about that, everybody? Now, COVID relief has been yanked, but the military is getting $782 billion. In the meantime, yesterday, Emmett Till was lynched in 1955. That's 67 years ago. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, which was introduced by our own Congressman, Bobby Rush, here in Chicago, and in the House, and Senators Cory Booker and Tim Scott of South Carolina and New Jersey. Well, it has passed unanimously, everybody. And now it goes to President Biden for his signature. Of course, it is named for the 14-year-old child, Emmett Till, who was brutally tortured and murdered in Mississippi in 1955, sparking, the modern day civil rights movement. Release the dough. That is what they're saying. Minneapolis teachers are striking for the first time in more than 50 years, everybody. It entered its second day yesterday as union representatives and district officials resumed negotiations over smaller class sizes, improved student supports, and better pay. What do you think about that, everybody? They're striking just outside of Chicago. They're striking all over the country. And then you see COVID relief has been yanked for the American people. But $782 billion with a B has gone to the military. Wow, everybody. We're going to be keeping our eyes peeled to find out what's going to happen in Minneapolis. South Korea, voters in South Korea have elected a new president, a conservative, who is very, very friendly toward the West, the United States, et cetera, et al. He's from the People Power Party, and they secured victory by what is called a razor-thin margin, pulling ahead of his rival by less than 1 percentage point. He's a newcomer to politics, having spent the 27 past years as a prosecutor. So we will see, everybody. So everybody, let's get to it. We've got Pastor Darius Brooks, who's going to give us some good news today. Pastor Brooks, what's on your mind today?
Good morning. It's so good to have you back.
It's wonderful hearing your voice. Of course, he's from Grace Central Church out there in Westchester, Illinois. And of course, this is the great Darius Brooks, the great psalmist and Grammy Award-winning songwriter, producer, and brilliant man of God. What's the good news? We need some today.
Yeah. And you know what? We already have the good news. We just got to keep reminding ourselves, which is this message is going to say, Santita, Malachi 3:6. It says, "For I am the Lord, and I change not. For I am the Lord, and I change not." And Santita, if I had to use my thought this morning, he ain't changing, but he's still changing some things. And I'm excited because I'm seeing it every day in my life, the same articulation articulation of how you shared with us with Emmett Till. People think things are not going to be uncovered. Things are not going to be undone. Yes, it is. And he still got people working, like Senator Bobby Rush and you on the radio giving good news, because God's going to come through. Even if we can't see it right now, he's going to come through in every area of our lives. The enemy or the inner helps us control what's around me or what's around us. And because he's not changing, he sees what's in me, Santita. He sees what's in you. And because he really loves me and you and those who really love him, he answers prayers his way, not ours, because he ain't changing his promise, watch this, for my small presence. Okay. Presence means what we think are gifts to ourselves when his plans are so much bigger. Emmett Till's story is a prime example. Truth is coming up and out, and people are still fighting. Prime example. Bobby Rush, Santita still on the radio, giving people the good news and some great information. With God's word, you crush every fear, every judgment. Don't apologize, strategize, or minimize God's full plan for you, me, and what he has going on, because it's already done. Santita, I was telling Grace Central on Sunday, I'm about to shout. Today, you on the radio, I'm in my house doing this program with you, and the year before the pandemic, God already knew this day was coming. As many people that didn't make it, as many people that God had plans for different things. He says, I know Santita and Darius don't know that right now before the pandemic, I'm got them doing some other things after this thing, and I don't know who I'm talking to, but you better know God and love God so much that his full plan for you, because it's already done. He ain't changing. And you got to stand on that ground that he ain't changing and know still that he's still changing things. And see, my prayer is that God's word becomes everything we need to be to us to help us fulfill his plan and to still be happy in the interim, because there's two purposes. There's our purpose, which is the desires of our hearts, and then it's his purpose. And we should have our desires of our hearts in his purpose so we can see his full plan. He ain't changing, but he's still changing some things.
Amen. Starting with us.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The inner us, we fight the mind and the heart. Fight all the time, Santita. The mind and the heart fight all the time. There's some things you already know. Like, for instance, ain't nothing I won't do for you. I tell Deborah, I got to go get Santita, and you wouldn't want me to do that. But Santita, your head, your heart fight all the time. Call me and see when I come.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's what God is telling us about his word in our hearts. No matter what we see, call me. And watch, I'll keep you in perfect peace. I got that. And fight like Rush did. I got that. Fight, Santita, like I'm telling you. Dare fighting whoever else under my voice. Don't stop fighting, which means standing your ground in God's word. But know that he is still changing things as we trust that he ain't changing by our promises to be in him and his word enough. He's going to give us everything our hearts desires.
Amen to that. I want to thank you for that, because we need that today, because there's so much uncertainty, but God does not change. But just very quickly, in less than a minute, there are some people who are not believers, and I appreciate that. I think you have to appreciate that. And some people who are agnostic, who are really on the fence. What do you say to them in about a minute?
Wonderfully. One of the greatest gifts, and I love that you asked me this, and I'll share it. One of the greatest gifts God has given all of us is the gift of choice. You can choose whatever you want, but you can't choose the consequences of his choices. Santita, I don't care what happens. Whoever goes into the hospital at the last days of their lives, the word of God says, so a man liveth, so shall he die. What is it that God has created that everything he said is true? Science is good, but at the end of the day, the word of God is clear about every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus the Christ is Lord. I say to all people, enjoy your choice because it's yours. Wonderfully, The word of God says, all that call Lord, Lord will not enter into the kingdom of God. So now that I know that, I stop anticipating people too, but yet I live a life to show them that he's so amazing and mine. And maybe we could be an example to them. But at the end of the day, I tell Grace Central often, Santita, stop trying to choose for people that when they see Jesus, he's going to say, it had nothing to do with them. I gave you that
Sure,
opportunity
sure.
with Santita on the phone. I gave it with your mother. I gave it with your dog. You remember that house you thought you wasn't going to get and I got? You thought it was just the bank of your credit? That was me.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so enjoy people, be an example to them. Love them. Love means respect. I'm sharing with Grace Central this principle. Stop connecting emotions and feelings with love, people. That's an attribute of love.
Okay.
We'll talk about that later, but that's how you do that. The Word of God says, choose you this day whom you shall serve. And I let people choose their God, whether it's a car or house. And I just learned to work with them every day, prayer for them every
Okay.
day. But my peace is that I can't control your choice. That's on you. But my choice, as for me and my house, what we going to do?
All
We're going
right.
to serve the Lord.
I love
Yep.
it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Pastor Darius Brooks, everybody. Grace Central in Westchester, Illinois. Very, very quickly, because I've got my doctor's holding. How can we come to your church and worship with you?
Of Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. It's on the west side, too, y'all. Hillside, Maywood, Bellwood. People think we out the country. We start service at 10:30 till noon. And Tuesday, 1 hour of power. Grace Central Church, info at gracecentral.net. I give great information,
Yes.
no church stuff. Just great information, which are the principles of the Word of God from Genesis to Revelation, that when you leave, always tell Grace Central, you'll know when God is speaking to you because they aha moment.
Amen to that. Amen to that, everybody. Join Grace Central. We love you, Pastor Darius Brooks. Let me bring on, absolutely. Let me bring on Doctors Deborah Furholden, epidemiologist, associate dean of public health at Michigan State University School of Medicine, and registered nurse, infection preventionist, research scholar at Case Western Reserve University, Dr. Shanina Knighton. You can reach her, of course, at Hey, Dr. Nina on social media. And of course, Dr. Deb is Dr. Deb Furholden, DEB. Everybody, welcome to the show. We're moving through because we've got a lot going on today, Dr. Deb and Dr. Shanina. We've got to look at the verdict that we're expecting. We're going to see if they're going to send Jussie Smollett to jail today. We're going to find out. We're going to talk about this anti-lynching law in about 10 minutes. And there's just so much that is going on. And then Ukraine, of course. But I came across something that I want to start with you, Dr. Verholden, but then we want to make a quick shift over to Dr. Shanina Knighton. There is the National Black Nurses Association. We have the National Bar Association. We have the National Medical Association. There was a time that African Americans Black people were not allowed to join the professional association. So you will hear the mainstream association, the so-called, not mainstream, the white associations were always the American Medical, the American Bar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you see national, that's the black group. But now you do have 114 chapters, over 30 states. There are some black nurses, but they're still underrepresented. And that is coming in a time, Dr. Verholden, when people say, I need someone who's culturally sensitive, someone who's not going to speak ill of me in my chart. What do you think about that? I mean, what can we do to remedy that?
Well, you got the nurse of all nurses on the line, so.
But you're a dean, right? And so you understand the admissions process. You understand really trying to, and you, as a scholar yourself, having come through Johns Hopkins, one of the top schools in the world, you understand how important it is to cultivate young talent, right? How important it is to cultivate people, and I don't think that we're doing enough of that when we really need nurses.
Well, and we wait too late. If undergrad is too late. If somebody that made it all the way to college, and don't get me wrong, people do slip through the cracks. We slip through the cracks at every point through the pipeline. We are more likely to even slip through the cracks as professors, right? So people who made it all the way through and get that terminal degree and then, go into academia, we still slip through the cracks. They leave us between assistant and associate professor all the time. But yeah, ideally the pipeline would start early. And I don't know if most people realize this, but there's a fair amount of, science that's needed to be a nurse. That foundation.
Absolutely.
Even in public health, every public health student, like at Johns Hopkins, you have to have taken and received a B or better in a biology course within the last 5 years to be admitted into the MPH program at Hopkins. And you know how during COVID they were waiving everything, they were waiving like GRE requirements and all that. They didn't waive that requirement. And I thought this is really interesting because there is a biological basis to these health sciences, right? And so people need that good foundation, and it needs to start much, much earlier. The other thing we need to think about is, okay, so we got to do the best with getting people into the pipeline and then making sure they don't drop out, right? Because even for a lot of schools, and I love the nurses. Love the nurses. State University don't get into the nursing. You can come in, but you don't get into the actual nursing program, I think, until year 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that at
Howard. Better job of.
Yeah.
We got to do a better job at stopping people from dropping out of the pipeline
and getting the support.
And then once we've got them, sure.
Yeah,
and there's plenty of things you can do from a policy perspective to support things like that, right? There's educational incentives. You know, a lot of this is happening right now around public health. Hello, we just had this epidemic. Now, what's really interesting is we also learned during this epidemic what a shortage we have of frontline healthcare workers, including nurses. We also found out how under-supported they were in their jobs. You know, mental health for a lot of medical professionals is very low because they take on a lot, but there's no one to heal the healer.
Absolutely.
We got to deal with these issues around pipelines. Some very simple policy is good pay for these physicians. You know, we call them essential, and now we really know, I think, and can have a better appreciation for truly how essential they are. Dr. Knighton is really the one who should be speaking about this, because she's the one who does the job.
Well, let's pop over to her. I've got about 3 minutes left here. What do you need? You're underrepresented, and we saw that, of course, during this pandemic. What do you need so that we can get more nurses and more nurses of color, Black nurses in particular, but indigenous nurses? I mean, we need nurses, and we need them of all backgrounds, Dr. Knighton.
So that's true, and I do echo what Dr. Deb is saying as well. One of the issues that I'll be honest, we even face now in academia, and I know this to resonate very true, is that we have, when Black nursing students come in, they typically fill out a place, okay? And so the thing is there are no cultural programs that's going to, I would say, when you're thinking about someone that comes from a predominantly, let's say, urban background, and they're then placed in, let's say, a predominantly white institution, naturally, you know, white students that may have not also been exposed to Black students are not going to navigate to be around students. And the thing is we try to ignore the irony that, let's say, media, speaking of, like, let's say, TV shows, movies, et cetera, play into the biases that we place about each other. But a lot of times, like, you know, I have Black nursing students that will come back and tell me that they are excluded from study groups. They don't feel comfortable around their peers. They're made to feel less than or feel dumb. And some of this comes with insecurity, right, too. So not necessarily just facing it because of the color barrier, but also just, I mean, me thinking about my experience in Cleveland Public Schools, I was not ready to take on most of the sciences. And so just as Dr. Dan mentioned, if you're not in nursing courses, like right when nursing school begins, depending on the program that you're in, then you're taking human anatomy and physiology, you're taking the chemistries, you're taking the biology, and you're expected to get, you know, nothing less than a B in these classes. And so if you've already been at a deficit in regards to your education from high school, then by the time you even make it to college or even go to apply for college, you're not even prepared with the minimal sciences. The other piece of it is when you get, or to even get into nursing school, There's sometimes entry exams that you have to take that are based off of critical thinking. And so if these are not components that are developed within the high school arena or earlier, then early on we end up with people that are motivated, that are encouraged to want to become a nurse, that are then turned away. And that was my experience. I actually had someone tell me, oh, instead of being a healthcare professional, they told me I should have been an educator. So they completely deterred me away from it. And then kept, I was going to say, dangling the carrot. So told me I needed to be in micro. Told me I needed to increase my grades in my anatomies. I did that. Then I came back and said, oh, well, now we need you to get a B in micro. It got to the point where I actually had to reach out to regional leadership. And this is like when I first got my nursing degree, and literally tell them, I said, listen, I said, if there's nurses like me or people that want to be nurses that are motivated to become nurses, why don't you have more pathways to help them? I said, you can't tell someone to make it to one milestone, and then you're constantly having them chase milestones. And that is the case. And when I got in, they told me, they were like, you're here, but we're not going to help you. And that's essentially what I was told when I got there.
Hold that thought. I want to give you a couple of minutes to complete that thought on the other side of the break, because people do not realize the social pressures. You can academically have the stuff, you just might not be prepared. But you have teachers and administrators who doubt your abilities, who talk down to you, who think less of you. And they stand in the way of you and your professional dreams and your aspirations. You need AUs and Hispanic serving schools because they see who you are, who you ought to be, not who they think. They don't pigeonhole you. Yeah, that happens a lot. I'm going to talk about that. And then anti-lynching. Finally, after 67 years, we're acknowledging all of the lynchings, the thousands that have happened since before the Republic was founded. Back in just a minute on the Santita Jackson Show.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 a.m. WC.
Great job, guys.
Thank you. Do we have Attorney Patillo up yet?
Ready to rock and roll.
Okay, great. Let me speak with him very
quickly.
quickly.
I love about the smokehouse barbecue bacon sandwich is when I take
Attorney
a
Patillo?
perfect blend from the bacon to the cheese. It's
Attorney Patillo?
Hey, I'm Katora, and a little thing I love about this.
Try right now. He should be able to hear you.
Okay, Attorney Patillo?
In your mouth, so you know it's creamy, cheesy, and delicious. This
Attorney
gooey
Patillo?
mac makes me cheese every time.
Testing.
Order
Attorney
dinner
Patillo?
delivered on the Chick-fil-A app today. Delivery fee and other restrictions apply.
Sorry, Santita. I'm trying to mood over some. Try right now.
Okay, Attorney Patillo?
For an exciting free radio offer. By now you
Attorney Patillo? Hey. Okay, Mike, I need you to turn down the radio here.
ABC Mouse is like a little
Just a bit so I can hear him. You know what? Let's focus on anti-lynching. I was going to shift over to Ukraine with you. You're more than welcome to do that. But I would like to focus on this, at least initially, on this anti-lynching bill that was passed that is awaiting the president's signature. Okay? Thank you so much. And of course, I'm going to give 2 minutes, literally, to Doctors for Holden and Knighton I want us to come back another day, Dr. Knighton and Dr. Verholden, to talk about really opening up the pathways to people of color getting into the sciences. I told you, our next door neighbor, he lived across the street actually, and he was our personal physician really all of my life. He died in 1985. It's hard to believe he's been gone that long. Died a couple of weeks before his daughter came out of Vassar. And Dr. Andrew Thomas created a program called Project 75. And, many people lead lives that are not that big. When he passed away, there were a couple of thousand people at his funeral. He had touched that many people. But what's significant about Project 75 is that he got more Black people through undergrad as pre-med, into medical school and through medical school than at any time as has happened in our history in the country. Under his program, more Black people became physicians. And I think that we need to revive that program and name it after him. I mean, doctor after doctor, physician after physician, that across that stage came into that pulpit to praise him. They said that all the things that you're talking about, Shanita, and all the things that you experienced. I remember in one of my, it was interesting, in my Harvard interview, the interviewer was very, very discouraging of me becoming a physician. My mother and her mother really wanted me to do that, so I said, okay, that's what I'll do that. I'll become that, even though I really wanted to go into law. But what was interesting about that was that now Howard recruited me as a math major. So how is it that Harvard couldn't see me doing math and things like that, but Howard could? It's interesting. I think we have to think about those things. So, Dr. Knighton,
Yes.
when we come back, we're going to have a couple of minutes for you to wrap this story up, but we need to come back and revisit these programs. We need to get some information because Dr. Thomas's wife is still living, and she's actually a registered nurse.
30 seconds, folks.
And I'm going to see if there are any documents on Project 75, because that is a program that needs to be revived. So many people. He got so many people.
What's the doctor?
Dr. Andrew Thomas broke a lot of ground here in Chicago. He went to Howard. He went to Howard's medical school, but he came out as an honor student, University of Chicago.
Radar. Chicago's Progressive Talk.
But they wouldn't admit him to their medical school.
820. We're
Coming on in, guys.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Are we changing the world? All right, everybody. It's Thursday, March 10th, 2022, the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you. We're going to be talking about this anti-lynching law in just a couple of minutes. But we've been talking about the underrepresentation of nurses of color, Black and Hispanic, and especially indigenous nurses are vastly underrepresented. And this is something that the National Black Nurses Association is really trying to deal with. And we've been hearing Dr. Knighton and her story and how she was absolutely discouraged. She wasn't discouraged, but she was actively discouraged by academics. They said, you're just not going to make it. And so they wrote her off. But look at her now. She's got a terminal degree. She's one of the top people in her field in the world. In a couple of minutes, what is our takeaway from your story, which I know has been replicated over and over and over again?
Yes. So I actually, when I'm talking to prospective nursing students, this is Dr. Dan mentioned it needs to start early. So I volunteer, and actually teach to high school students, so sophomores going up to the senior years in preparation for their ACT. So when I'm talking to different student groups, I think the main lesson that I tell them is to make sure that you don't allow someone to discourage you from what you want to do. And I tell them the story about how I almost wasn't a nurse because somebody else that was supposed to be fostering my hopes and my dreams actually pretty much dismissed them and thought that they could tell me what I should do with my life. And so I tell them to make sure that if they want to do something, they stick with it because they're going to have regrets. And so for me, just as you mentioned, I do tell my students, I say, well, look at me now. I said, if I had listened to my one professor, or my teachers or anyone that I came across and said, okay, well, maybe you shouldn't be a nurse, then I wouldn't be a nurse. And I graduated with honors throughout all of my programs. And so it wasn't that. The problem was me preparing to get there. And so once I got there, I was able to do the work. And so oftentimes we have to be unafraid to reach out for resources, unafraid to realize our shortcomings, unafraid to recognize that sometimes the education systems that we're in may not prepare us, but it does not mean that we are not capable and able to do the work. And so that would be my takeaway message for anyone that is thinking about a nursing program or any healthcare profession, because a lot of times when we start taking a prereq in college, that is the time of when we end up switching to an easier major.
Amen to that. And I want to thank you for that. That is that's good news today, too. I want to thank you for that. The last word here, but Dr. Deb, you want to say something very quickly before we go?
No, I think Dr. Knighton hit it, hit it right on the head.
Oh, yeah.
The other thing I always say to people, if you want to know what people's priorities are. You have to look at how they spend their money. That's true if you're talking about an individual, if you're talking about a family, if you're talking about a whole country or a whole government. You got to look at where they put their money. And we don't invest enough money in education. We don't invest enough money in creating these strong, pipelines for people. And even now we can't get, government to recognize that the cost of people acquiring these degrees and all of the massive amount of student loan debt that they're left with is a barrier for people to even be in these careers. So I've heard a lot of relief happening right now. I know a lot of people who have previously applied and weren't eligible or didn't get it, and now they're getting federal loan repayment.
Well, you know what? They yanked COVID relief.
Your first 100 payments, and they make the rest.
Yeah, but they yanked COVID relief, and now they're giving $780+ billion to the Pentagon. I mean, look, what you can say what you will about President Gaddafi, and he did a lot of great things over there. Yes, he did. What he did do was pay for education for everybody, for every Libyan, wherever you wanted to go in the world. The government paid for you. When you got married, you got $50,000 because they were eliminating poverty in Libya. And before they became a failed state, after we led the coup that got them out, that's what they were doing. They were investing in people. Other countries invest in people, and we're going to need to do that too. Ladies, we're going to have to revisit that, and I'm going to get that information to you about Project 75, Dr. Deborah Verholden, because, it's something that you really need to look into. And it was Dr. Andrew Thomas's baby, and he was one of our pioneering physicians. Went to University of Chicago, came out with honors, but they would not admit him to their medical school. So he went to Howard, came out with honors, and came back to Chicago, made history, he had several practices, one of which was in the heart of the Black community at the Robert Taylor Homes, which was the largest housing project in the United States of America. So he was on the Gold Coast and the Soul Coast. And he would take the Black people from the Soul Coast to what was then the most exclusive hospital in the city, because he was the first Black person to practice out of St. Joseph's Hospital. Oh, I got to tell his story. He did that, and it would freak everybody out, but he was still doing it. And in the meantime, even then, he was still trying to get our kids through high school, into college, through there, and into medical school. And he did that, he got more of us through medical school, and as he made more of us physicians his program did that more than any program has ever done. Dr. Bill Wallace at the University of Illinois, he too has passed on. He did so many great things there. But Dr. Thomas's program was a nationwide program that did so much. Well, let me shift on over to Attorney Robert Patillo. He has been in Selma, and he has been traveling, just trying to get people to get registered to vote. And we have missed you. And you sent me this text last night. You said, I'm back. And I said, oh boy, you're back just in time. There's so much that we've got to talk with you about. But let's start here. The Senate has unanimously passed this anti-lynching bill. Of course, this has been Congressman Bobby Rush's baby, the former Black Panther, our congressman from Chicago who's about to retire. And he had on the Senate side Senators Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, and Cory Booker, a Democrat from New Jersey. And it passed unanimously. What is this anti-lynching bill, and why did it take so long? Emmett Till was killed in 1955. That's almost 70 years ago. Robert Patillo.
Well, it's been interesting. It's been it's great to be back. Of course, your father has more energy than any human being on the face of the earth. So it's not so much that we stopped; I just escaped because he was going to run us all into the ground. And he's still going. He's still going to be going. So I want people to make sure they support him. Of course, by going to rainbowpush.org, signing up, getting memberships, and getting involved in the fight for justice. And the same reason that it took us so long to get voting rights is the reason it's taken so long to get this anti-lynching bill. Because from around the 1880s to about the 1960s, over 4,000 African Americans were lynched in this country. That is a form of racial violence, which was meant for one specific reason, which was to intimidate the population and to reinforce white supremacy. The best analogy I can think of in history
And then the Roman Republic, after Spartacus and his slave revolt was finally put down by the Roman generals, what they did was take the rebels and crucify them along the highway leading into Rome for about 100 miles. So anyone entering the city would see those bodies hanging, and then it would make them understand that revolt is futile, that you cannot fight back against the empire, that you might as well lay down your arms and submit to the gladiatorial arena, submit to subjugation, submit to your place in life, because you don't want to end up like these rebels. And that was the entire purpose behind the crucifixion, including the crucifixion of Christ. And that was the entire purpose behind lynching in America, was to reinforce that level of white supremacy, so that by making it such a public spectacle, by making sure that everyone in the community saw what the cost of standing up against the empire of white supremacy was, that it would keep people in their place. And indeed, the reason that many northern cities are populated with so many African Americans now that can track their lineage in a direct straight line down to the Deep South is because they left during the Great Migration, in large part because of the fear of racial violence and lynching. If you draw a straight line from Chicago, you end up right there in the Mississippi Delta, and a lot of people can trace their lineages in that way. So we have to further explore the full effect of lynchings and racial violence in the South. Lynching were just the most extreme version. There were beatings. There were other discriminatory methods taken. And I think this is also a great time to explore many of the white race riots which took place in the early half of the 20th century that have in large part been erased from history. Most major cities, most small towns even, will have a recollection or stories from generations past of episodes of white racial violence, which are meant to reinforce the social standing of African Americans, those communities that have been forgotten to time. And we have to ensure that we keep those stories going. Now, this legislation itself is primarily symbolic. This would have been great legislation to pass in 1922. Would have had a very important effect then. The effect that it has today primarily is to one, ensure that when lynchings do happen in this country, that is not that one, it defines it in federal law and outlaws it as a very separate hate crime and federal right of action. So if something meets the criteria of being a lynching, that even state and local officials refuse to prosecute it, you can take this to the federal government. The Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division will be able to criminally prosecute those individuals who perpetrated that lynching under federal law. So that's the big change that this law has made. And the reason that it has been blocked for so long is that it's an admission by white America, it's an admission by our government that these things actually occurred and that they were an issue. America doesn't like admitting when it has been wrong, no matter how long after it's been wrong it has taken place. And this is why we've seen the can kicked down the road. Even during the Trump administration, there was a chance to pass this law, but Rand Paul blocked it, saying that it was too broad. So this is a negotiated down, more narrowly tailored version of that anti-lynching legislation. Those are an important step historically, but going forward, I think it would have been far more important to push through a compromise on police lynchings of African Americans in this country, to broaden the definition of crime so that you don't need a perfect storm like we saw in the Ahmaud Arbery case to get a conviction, to really reform many of these laws that were written in the 1950s and 1960s to help African Americans, to update them so they match the current challenges that we face in our community here in the 21st century. So it was a significant piece of legislation, but it was not the end-all, be-all. It's something that we should commemorate, but it's also encourage us to continue fighting more going forward to fight the issues that exist with us today.
Which does bring me to Rand Paul saying that this was too broad. Was this legislation then narrowed? And how does one define lynching? Because should we not look at Philando Castile and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor? I mean, how do we define lynching? how should we define it? How do we define it, and how should we?
Well, that's part of why I say this legislation is primarily symbolic, because what Rand Paul's objection was is he claimed that, well, he didn't want any minor abrasion with a racial motive to be considered a lynching. So they narrowed it to say that only if death or serious bodily injury results, that counts as a lynching. So that was the primary difference between this legislation and the 2020 legislation, which was blocked by Rand Paul in the Senate. And when we're talking about the definition of lynching, of course, the bill still has to go to reconciliation, and then it'll land on the president's desk, where we'll get the exact language of what it will look like. But it's going to consist of a racial component. That was this act taken because of the race of the individual. Secondarily, there's the public aspect of it. Was this meant to incite fear in a community based upon the race of the individual? So it's a public display of the body. And then I think finally it will have to be the intentionality of it. Was that the explicit intent of the individuals to use race and racialized violence to control the community? So those definitions are going to be important because often you're not going to see somebody being just hung by a rope in the 21st century, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't a lynching. People have to separate the idea of somebody simply hanging from a tree as being a lynching from someone can be shot. And if it has that racialized motive, if it was meant to strike fear into the community, if it's and then also the Department of Justice regulations will be issued after the law is written to interpret the law. So we will get a full definition of exactly what the federal government determines a hate crime to be after it's implementing and after those go into effect. But I do think it's going to be largely symbolic and very difficult to prove the intentionality aspect of it unless you have a situation like the Aubrey case where you have the people literally on text messages explaining exactly what they were doing, when they did it, and how they did it, with racial slurs and all. I think other than situations where people are that explicit and dumb, it's going to be very difficult to convict people under the statute.
Because we're not looking at, because it seems that has this legislation been written in a way that if you said it is largely symbolic, and most people agree that it is, but is there any aspect of it that has some teeth? Or do we need to go to the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act in order to get real teeth? And would that act have embedded in it a definition for lynching? I mean, because, it just seems that George Floyd was lynched. The way he was killed, it was public, it was a public execution, and it was designed, and it dared the onlookers to do anything. It dared them to do anything. And that's what lynching does. It intimidates people into silence. And sadly, it also entertained some people, tragically. It wasn't after church activity, after all.
Well, I think you're correct, and I think that's where that difficulty comes in statutorily in proving those things, because you also have to prove the racialized motive. So would not simply have to be that Officer Chauvin killed George Floyd and did it in a public way, in a way to instill control and fear in the community. You also have to prove that he did it because he was an African American, and that there was that racialized motive in it included. That's why I believe the law to be primarily ceremonial. Kind of as a going away present to Bobby Rush as he retires from Congress, and something that Republicans can put in their cap for re-election and say, look, I voted to end lynchings in America. I mean, who doesn't want to campaign on that? That sounds great. But I do think we're going to need more legislation that actually addresses many of the issues of the day. Today, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would have been a great start. Even the Tim Scott Justice Act would have been a great start. But I don't think we have any current pending legislation that goes as deep as is necessary to really challenge police unions, to really challenge the institutions of corrupt policing in this country. I think that it's telling that in America, when you say we want to stop bad police, people automatically jump up and say you want to get rid of all police, because they can't even understand or comprehend the concept of just simply getting rid of the bad ones. They're so closely intertwined together that any attack against bad police are seen as an attack on the institution of policing itself, and that's what makes it difficult to make any sort of public policy step forward on this issue. So it's great to ceremoniously pass the anti-lynching bill, but we have to deal with the issue of police lynchings today, and also the rise of these white supremacy far-right groups like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, who are the modern-day versions of these groups, and will be using very different methods. They have lobbyists, too. They can read legislation, too, so they know how to make sure that whatever they do is within the covertures of not violating those laws, which is why you have to have these laws drafted more broadly to curtail the maximum amount of action.
You know, Dr. Shanina Knighton stayed with us because she wanted to hear what you had to say. And you said you read Rand Paul's legislation and what?
So I put it to you like this: when the controversy was about, so this is when Vice President Harris was for it, and Senator Cory Booker was for it, and Rand was against it. It made me want to go and actually read it, and I actually agreed with Rand about the actual bill. So they actually had it written to where it could be based off of religion, it can be based off of sex, and it can be based off of race. And depending on the crime, it was a minimum of a certain amount of years, which I saw 10, or it was a maximum of 20. And in my opinion, I felt that the way that the bill was written, if, let's say, 2 African-American males just so happen to encounter, let's say, somebody of Catholic origin, is that then, the premise of the argument considered, to fall up under the anti-lynching bill, and then just means more incarceration, because it then provides more leverage for people to be incarcerated for things that may not necessarily be race or religion based. So I did not like the bill as it was written. I felt for as much history, as much detail and things that have been gone through, it more so provided a narrative form opposed to an actionable plan that would not lead to more incarceration or mass incarceration of people of color. I mean, because that can be said for many when we're talking about different cultures and different religions, that if someone has an altercation or they falls out, who's to say that the current system that we live in will not make it about one of those issues, even if it's completely unrelated? But we also have, legal, like we have legal teams that could actually really craft the argument, right, to make it seem as if that situation is that. So I personally feel like it's going down a slippery slope, and that it does have to be more detailed to make sure that it's not going to backfire on the people that is impacted, that is meant to help.
Okay, so what's your response, Robert?
Well, I agree with that. That's why I think they also often this legislation is difficult to draft, particularly given the current state of America, where now you have other groups who all want minority status whenever something happens, and so it makes it difficult to specifically tailor it towards actually addressing the wrong that is meant to address, which is racialized violence, specifically against the African American communities. But then secondarily, to ensure that it cannot be turned around, as was just said, and backfire against those communities. And a perfect example of that will be affirmative action, where we really were fighting to get more African Americans opportunities, and it ended up, if you look at analysis at 30 years, benefiting white women going to college and the Asian American community getting into Ivy League institutions. So we do have to ensure that legislation is narrowly tailored. But what I think the biggest issue is going to be creating a criteria, and for the most part, it's going to be done by the Justice Department, creating criteria, whereas you can determine if there was a racialized motive in the action, and there was not simply a regular altercation, that one of the driving factors behind it was the protected classification of the individual who was being wronged. Because if drawn too broadly, then any any gang shooting could be treated as a hate crime or treated as a lynching. Drawn too narrowly, and then the killing of Ahmaud Arbery would not count as a lynching when it very clearly was. So the drafting of this legislation is very important, and also the acting documents and the Department of Justice regulations, which were interpreted, will be very crucial. And then finally, the court decisions, once this is implemented, when it does go before the federal courts, how the courts rule on interpreting these statutes will be crucial to determining how effective it will be to stopping the acts which was intended to stop. So it's going to be a complicated set of circumstances over the next several years to see how effective this legislation can be. But I think at current, it very much is a ceremonial piece of legislation, which we will rarely see enacted. It'll give us something else where whenever there is a shooting or something along those lines, we can call the Justice Department to use the anti-lynching legislation. But as we've seen with hate crimes legislation, that will still be very judiciously handed out. It won't be a writ large cause of action to stop the racialized killings of African Americans in this country, particularly by law enforcement.
Amen. And you know what? And we have to be really unafraid and unashamed of advocating for the ancestors, Robert and Dr. Knighton. You know, many of us are afraid of someone telling us that we're playing the race card. No. We've had Catholics, we've had Jews, we've had some other folk lynched in the United States, but lynching was targeted toward African Americans. And we should say that because the historical record reflects that. If you even it out, it's been a little more than a lynching a month since 1619. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. So yeah, this is racialized, and we need to deal with that today, because now they don't use nooses, now they use knees, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's talk with Jesse Smallett in a hot second, and of course Ukraine and these rising gas prices. So much to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute.
I'm getting vaccinated with
Prevnar
Prevnar 20.
So am I, because
Robert?
I'm at risk for pneumococcal pneumonia.
I'm asking about Prevnar 20 because there's a chance pneumococcal pneumonia could put me in the hospital. Age 65 or older, you may be at increased risk for pneumococcal pneumonia.
Is
Ask
Robert
your doctor
still there?
or pharmacist about getting vaccinated with Prevnar 20, pneumococcal 20-valent conjugate vaccine, a Pfizer vaccine that can help protect against pneumococcal
this
pneumonia
is live
in just
radio,
one
everybody.
dose. Prevnar 20 is approved for adults to help prevent infection from 20 strains of the bacteria that cause pneumococcal pneumonia.
So,
Continued approval may depend on a supportive study.
Mike,
Don't get Prevnar 20
Robert,
if you've had a
is
severe
anybody
allergic
there?
reaction to the vaccine or its ingredients. Adults with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine.
Mike is okay. Robert, are you still there?
For additional common side effects and full prescribing information,
Okay, do you want to stay on to talk about Jesse Smallett? You know, Reverend wrote a letter of support for him.
Or visit Prevnar20.com.
I want to be able to
Okay, hold on. Have you seen the letter of
my
support?
doctor about getting vaccinated with Prevnar 20.
If cold winter calls have turned into warm spring leads, you need Indeed, the all-in-one platform to interview.
Have you seen the letter of support? Robert?
Yes.
Have you seen the letter of support?
Oh, I have not. Let me look it up now.
Okay, I can send it to you.
Oh, thanks.
I'm sending it to 2 different addresses. Okay, your Rainbow Push address and your personal address. Okay? Sending that to you. I'm going to have Kyle Bowser from the NAACP in Los Angeles. But I'm going to be talking with Dr. Max Wolf about Ukraine. You know what's interesting about Ukraine? Dr. Knighton, are you still there? Dr. Furholden, are you all still there?
I'm still here.
You know, it's every time
Hey, Dr. Dean.
you know, every time we mention the neo-Nazi presence, which is quite significant in Ukraine, and particularly in their military, that is something that is dismissed. Have you noticed that, Robert? It's like no one.
Yeah, I have.
It's like, wait a minute.
As I said from the beginning, this has very much been a wag the dog situation, and they keep doubling and tripling down on it.
Whew. And you made me look at Wag the Dog again last last Friday. I said, "Oh boy, I needed a break because I've had a tough few days." But
Is that the movie with Robert De Niro?
And Dustin Hoffman.
Where they make up a fake war and the little girl carrying a bag of Doritos, and then they crop a dog in and make up a whole war to take attention off of his craziness.
And they made a song. They had a whole campaign.
Yeah.
But you know what? Now, I'm going to tell you the movie that you need to see is Bob Roberts. That's Tim Robbins' movie. Did you ever see that?
I have not.
Bob Roberts is very, very heavy. It's a lot. It is a great, that too is a great movie. It's great. It's great. Right up until the last frame, honest to God. Tim Robbins made that movie. He made it. And when you see it, you'll see why they did not distribute it widely. And of course, I saw it the first weekend that it was out. Because I knew they were going to yank it. Because, he's got very progressive politics. And but you need to see both of those movies. But what they're doing here, I said, wait a minute. They have honored this, the head of the Azov battalion, which is pure. They're a bunch of Nazis. That's what they are. I said, wait a minute. And they're like, no, that's not true. Medea Benjamin, thankfully, just wrote a wonderful op-ed piece when she said, there is no wisdom in pretending that Ukraine's neo-Nazis don't exist. It's just like, stop it already. Stop. And that's what the American media are saying. Mike?
Hey, Santita.
Hey, hon.
I'm back.
Hey, hon. You know what I'm going to do? I have a live read after I do the headlines.
Yep.
So I need you to capture that and send it to me, okay?
Okay.
And I'll just say, we have a campaign to get homes. Do we have Attorney Bowser on? Or Mr. Bowser?
You want me to get him on the air for you?
Yes, please, because he comes up like now.
Yeah, I got you, Miss Jackson.
Okay, thank you. Who am I talking to now?
That's Matt and Mike are both here.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. I'm like, wait a minute. Okay. Wait a minute. I'm getting all these voices. Wait.
Did you get the new copy I sent you from David Hochberg?
Oh, you know what? Let me look at that. And because I will pull that up right now. Because I was going to do something else. He said he would send more, and I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think Steve Lessman also sent it.
I didn't see that. But I'll bring it out, because I sure will read it today. Okay.
I will send it again shortly.
Okay. It came from you, right?
Yeah, I sent one like 2 days ago.
Okay. Sorry, I've had two friends in hospice, and I have been dealing with that, quite frankly.
Hey, Miss Jackson, Mr. Bowser is ready to rock and roll.
Okay, Mr. Bowser, how are you? Are you Attorney Bowser or Mr. Bowser?
You can call me Mr. I am an attorney, but you can call me Mr.
No, honey, I'm giving you all those handles. How about that,
Kyle?
No, I'm giving you your handles. How about that?
Okay.
I do not play that. How are you? Very early in the morning.
Wonderful. It's good to speak with you.
Thank you. It's wonderful speaking with you. I've got Attorney Robert Patillo. He's our Southeastern Regional Director from Rainbow Push. Brilliant. And he also hosts his own show on WAOK in Atlanta. And, just want to lend some support. I've got to reach out to the Smallett when I get off the air.
15 seconds.
Stand by, everybody. We're coming up. Okay, here we go.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Welcome. It's Thursday, March 10th, 2022. It's a joy to be with you today on the Santita Jackson Show, coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT, inheriting the mantle of Air America. That's what we used to be, but today we're WCPT and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. Let's talk about Jussie Smollett. Will he get time today? Yes or no? You have some very prominent people and civil rights leaders and groups who have said, he needs mercy. And so what do we do about that? And then, of course, we're talking about Ukraine. We're talking about Ukraine and these rising gas prices. Now, mind you, the gas prices, to be fair, were rising and inflation was at a 40-year high before this. So please don't just put this on this conflict. We had some problems before. Let's get to some of these headlines, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 29 degrees, snow showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, high of 27 degrees, mostly sunny. In the NBA, the Bulls were triumphant. They snapped that losing streak, everybody, 114 to 108 over the Pistons. And the Timberwolves, they just keep rolling along, 132 to 102 over the Thunder. And tonight, we're going to have an active night in hockey. Chicago will be playing the New York Bruins, and the Wild will be playing the Red Wings. Everyone is still talking about Ukraine. What is going to happen there? Well, I tell you what has already happened. What has happened is that we lost COVID relief in this $1.5 trillion omnibus government spending bill, but $782 billion went to the Pentagon. What do you think about that? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. What do you make of that? In the meantime, President Zelensky in Ukraine is repeating his call for NATO to establish a no-fly zone over the country following a series of Russian bomb attacks. America pushes back on that because they said that will be an act of war against Russia. Are we prepared for that, everybody? Are we prepared for Russia and this agreement that has no limits, as they said, with the Chinese? The Senate unanimously passed an anti-lynching bill after a century of failure, everybody, on Monday. They unanimously passed legislation that would make federal lynching a hate crime, that would make lynching a federal hate crime. And now it has passed the Senate. And of course, in the U.S. House of Representatives, Congressman Bobby Rush from Chicago, former Black Panther, this has been his baby. And on the Senate side, he had as his partners Republican Tim Scott from South Carolina and Democrat Cory Booker from New Jersey. And now it goes to President Biden for his signature. It is, of course, named after the 14-year-old child, Emmett Till, who was brutally tortured and lynched, murdered in Mississippi, sparking the modern-day civil rights movement. Minneapolis school teachers are still on strike for the first time in more than 50 years, everybody. They're still in negotiations over smaller class sizes, improved student supports, and better pay. Sounds so familiar. We have a district just outside of Chicago boycotting for the same thing. In addition to demanding caps on class sizes and counselors in every school, the union is seeking higher starting salaries for educational support professionals, ESPs, as well as a, quote, a 12% salary increase for first-year educators and 5% increases for second-year teachers, according to the Star Tribune of Minneapolis, St. Paul. So we're going to continue to follow that particular story because that is a big one, everybody. Our educators and our children and everyone within that system and those systems in the United States need the support that they so desperately need and that they so dearly deserve. Everybody, you know, we're trying to save some homes here. We're trying to help you to buy your homes. If you don't have good credit, if you have no credit, if you need to build your credit, Team Hochberg will help you to do that. If you're trying to purchase your new home, if you see these 2 and 3 flat buildings in your neighborhood that you think may be beyond your grasp, call Team Hochberg. They can help you out. If you need to refinance your existing home, if you need to secure a VA loan, if you need a reverse mortgage, call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, and they will put you on the right track. Go to 56david.com. Get a free consultation. There's no problem that is too bad, too small, too big for them not to resolve it for you. Lori, 62, she was retired. She had limited retirement savings like so many people, and she lived in a $300,000 home. That's nice, but she struggled to pay her mortgage and minimum payments on her credit cards. She had $40,000 worth of debt. You do know a lot of people are shopping for their groceries with their credit cards now because most of us can't even afford to go to the emergency room. So she called Team Hochberg for a free consultation. And Scott Ellis helped her to consolidate her debt with a cash out refinance, reduced her payment over $1,100 a month. That's more than, wow, $13,000 a year. And most importantly, eliminated a tremendous amount of stress from her life. And they can do the same for you. So call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or visit 56david.com so that you can get out of a financial hole. You can buy a home. You can save your home. Trust me, call them, get that free consultation, and set up a program so that you can move to financial success. Well, today is the day that Jussie Smollett is going to find out whether he is going to have to serve time. Will he be sentenced to prison time for a class 4 felony? Or will they find an alternative, like public service? What do you think? He was known for public service before all of this began. I mean, he reached out to the families in Flint with no fanfare, with no publicity, at the height of their crisis, and gave them a Christmas, bought toys for all of the children of Flint, bought out a theater so they would have a good time, served them food. He's from a family that's very, very politically active. So it comes as no surprise that a Harry Belafonte would be reaching out, trying to save this young man's life. He said, don't throw him away. Reverend Jesse Jackson, NAACP President, Attorney Derek Johnson, Sharon Gelman, Executive Director of Artists for New South Africa. Jussie worked for her for many years, which is not surprising when you know his whole family. They are very, very, very involved in movements. Please, his godmother's Angela Davis. Yeah, that one, everybody. Black Lives Matter. There's so much that goes into this young man's life, and so Robert Patillo is staying with us because we do want to talk about this case because this is something that is near and dear to my heart, and it's near and dear to my mother's heart. She talks about not throwing people away. We've got to find alternatives to the way that we sentence and throw people away and not give them any alternatives. Kyle Bowser, Attorney Kyle Bowser, Vice President of the NAACP in Los Angeles. Just love those Image Awards. And of course, I remember Willis Edwards. These are my people. Danny Bakewell, all our folks out there. Love you out there in LA. Love you, love you, love you. Vice President Bowser, help us to understand, why has the NAACP felt compelled to write a letter of support for Jussie Smollett?
Good morning to you. Thank you for having us on to speak to this issue. As you mentioned, our president and CEO, Derek Johnson, wrote a letter recently to Judge Lynn asking for leniency in this case. And he asked why. The reason is because of all the things you just said. Jussie Smollett and his family have, for a very, very long time, been right at the forefront of advocating on behalf of our community. Jussie in particular has put his own personal reward on the table to share with those who have had lesser advantages. He has paid for people to go to school. He has given money to schools. He has supported all kinds of aspects of the movement. And we think that he is a person who has demonstrated his commitment to the well-being of our community. And so for that reason, we thought that he is deserving of some leniency.
We're speaking with Vice President Kyle Bowser from the NAACP in Los Angeles, California. Is there a takeaway that we can have from this moment? Because you have a lot of progressive prosecutors, one of whom is in Chicago, Kim Foxx, and people like Kim Foxx and Marilyn Mosby. All of these people have dealt with a lot of political heat because they said these nonviolent offenders, these people who have another kind of contribution to make, we don't need to, they've already paid. And, quite frankly, Jussie Smollett has already, he committed to public service, and he has been doing that through this whole period, which is really a continuation of what he always has done. Are you really trying to put into action the way that we ought to be treating everybody, not just someone who is well known and well heeled?
I couldn't agree with your mother more. We have, as a society, evolved to an era of cancel culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that whatever errors any of us might make sort of subject us to being hauled away and locked away for the remainder of our lives sometimes. And it's really unfortunate. Jussie is just one of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who have so much more to contribute if society would just give them the opportunity. Obviously, there's a need for some kind of recognition and acknowledgement of whatever transgression is committed. But we need to get away from this idea of canceling people.
And a class 4 felony, what is that? Because class 4 sounds like it's really low on the totem pole of felonies.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm no lawyer. You're the lawyer here. You were Attorney Patillo. I mean, class 4 doesn't sound like murder.
That's correct. And I don't know that you need to be a lawyer really to analyze this situation. I'm not from Chicago. I've paid some attention to the case, and my understanding is that the grievance that the city or the county has waged is that Jussie's action has cost the taxpayers, and it has cost the time and resources and stress of some law enforcement agencies. I think there's a long line of people who have been in the taxpayers' pockets that you need to talk to long before you get to a Jussie Smallett. And if we want to talk about the stress and the anguish that's perpetrated on law enforcement officers and law enforcement agencies, we perhaps should look at the situation on January 6th of last year and do a probe into, or a deeper probe into, what we're going to do about that, how we're going to resolve that situation before we get to, well, this guy, cost us some money. The only victim in this particular case is Jussie himself. He's the only one who had any physical injury. And as you've already mentioned, he has since paid dearly. He's lost his employment, lost his standing in the Hollywood community. And so I don't know that there's any more pound of flesh that needs to be extracted from him.
Well, it's a nonviolent crime, and class 4 felonies, from what I can understand, typically get probation.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And Judge Lynn has the ability to make that happen.
Well, but did you see his behavior? I mean, during the trial, number one, they shut off the cameras. So we didn't get a chance to see him the way we got a chance to see the comportment, I would say, of the Kyle Rittenhouse judge, or the comportment of the judge in the Ahmaud Arbery case, or in the police officer who was just acquitted who was just given just a minimal amount of time in the killing of the young man up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. His name escapes me at the moment. But we at least got a chance to see these judges. But this judge was really accused of committing outrageous behaviors. I mean, he was even, the defense said he tried to strike one of the lawyers. He was very, very upset.
He was accused. Yes, he was accused of lunging. We actually sent some courtroom observers to try to, get a sense of what was happening inside the courtroom, and they were escorted out. Not only escorted out of the courtroom, but escorted out of the building. So it is unfortunate that the decision was made to not turn cameras on. I find it ironic now that we're at the sentencing phase that the cameras are going to be turned back on. I'm a little concerned as to why that is. I hope that's not to put on a show. But you're absolutely right. The class 4 felony is nonviolent. It doesn't require any kind of imprisonment, and Judge Lynn has the discretion to treat this in a way that it really deserves to be treated. Everyone's really ready to move on.
I'm just wondering if he's going to exercise it, because his behavior has been questionable, to put it charitably. When you hear about this, let me bring in Attorney Robert Patillo. He's the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push. I mean, when you hear about this, as we lay out, that this is a class 4 felony, It's nonviolent nature of the crime. The only person who was hurt was Jussie Smollett. Um, he does not have a criminal record. He has a really, really rich history of philanthropy, of working in the community. He is also fearful for his safety, Robert, because he is a black, Jewish, gay man who is also, no one put this in, no one is discussing this, who is also very famous. Robert Patillo.
hmm I agree, and I think those are all going to be mitigating factors that the defense should present during sentencing. I do think there probably will be one stumbling block in this quest to ensure that he doesn't get jail time, which is that normally the judges want the defendant to admit guilt during the sentencing phase, to make a heartfelt apology to the court, to the victims, to anybody who was wronged. That's just kind of par for the course in many sentencing hearings. And I think it's going to have to be a decision made by the defense team as to whether or not they will be willing to admit to guilt in this case in order to receive to potentially have a lighter sentence, or to not make a plea for or apology to the court and this heartfelt plea to avoid jail time, running the risk of actually having to serve, maybe 6 months in custody. So I think that's going to be the thing to watch today, whether or not the judge demands that the defendant apologize and admit to guilt. And then if they do, if that's something that the defense is willing to partake in, because Mr. Smallett has been steadfast the entirety of this time that he was being 100% truthful, and that may also affect any potential appeals that he could have down the line to clear his name if he does admit to guilt during the sentencing phase.
Everybody, what are your thoughts? What do you think is going to happen? I mean, and what do you think is going to happen? I'm just, given that's why I brought up the behavior of Judge Lynn, which was questionable from start to finish, just from shutting off the cameras to lunging at this defense attorney, bringing her to tears, which, women have to work very hard to get in these positions. And a black woman has to work even harder. You can't bring these women to tears easily. I'm sure that was so shocking. It was shocking to read it. So I'm wondering, when you have said, I am innocent, this did happen, to make him admit guilt in court, to me, it just undercuts everything that he stood for. And so I'm just wondering how you think this is going to go forward as an attorney yourself, given your experience, Vice President Bowser. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, at this point of the game, I think it really is about strategery.
Okay.
The decision has been made that by a group of 12 strangers who were not present on the day in question, that one storyteller was more compelling than another storyteller. We're not sure whether there was complete fairness in the way in which those stories were unfolded. That really that responsibility rested on the judge to sort of maintain that sense of fairness and balance. But a jury of 12 has made their decision. So now I think what Jussie has to decide is, okay, how do I navigate this outcome? And perhaps to just be strategic, you do apologize to the court, apologize to the community, and hope that renders a sentencing outcome that is more lenient than what you might otherwise experience. I don't know that this necessarily will cause people to have a lifelong regard for Jussie Smollett. I'd like to believe that he's invested way too much on the positive side of the ledger in his life, that he just needs to get through this. We all need to just get through this and move on.
Get through this and move on, everybody. What do you think? Continue to call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. You know what? I have to tell you, Attorney Kyle Bowser, Vice President of the NAACP of Los Angeles, and just everyone, get a lifetime membership with NAACP. They have been standing for us for more than a century, and they deserve our support. Thank you for all that you do and have done. You know what? I think that uh, what do they say? Bars do not a prison make. I'm not getting it right, but I'm not as articulate as I can be at this moment. But the fact is, I think that he needs to stand on what he stood on, Attorney Bowser. And, these people act as if, with all that we have experienced in this country, that prison is something that's going to frighten you. What? Now, and should he be protected? Absolutely, if he goes. But we should also understand that for a class 4 felony, when people are routinely given probation, for him to go, it's going to speak about the system much more than it's going to speak about him. And I don't want to see him go. I don't want to see him go to prison. I don't want to see him go. I do not. But I am outraged by the treatment of this judge. I am outraged by so much of the behavior in this trial. And, even these brothers, they were held up to, it's an hour before they would have been charged by the Chicago police. They maintained Jussie's innocence. And that never gets out here in the mainstream media. The final 30 seconds belong to you, Attorney Bowser.
Wow. I completely understand the principle that you're articulating, and we know of many, many heroes throughout our history who have in fact stood on principle and said, you know what, you're not going to get me to confess to something I didn't do, and we admire them. I'm not sure that this particular case rises to the level of import that those heroes represented. And I know Jesse Smallett, and I just want to see him treated fairly and given an opportunity to rebuild his life.
Which he has not been from soup to nuts. He's not been treated fairly. He's not been, everybody. He's not been. Right. And I think this is terrible. And we're going to talk about this tomorrow. We're going to see what they're going to do with him. You got all these Wall Street bandits walking free, all these people who drop bombs on people, and they're walking free. You kidding me? War criminals walking free? No, there's something that's off about our value system. I'm praying for Jussie Smollett and his family today. Let's talk about Ukraine. Let's talk about a war that people just seems like no one wants to negotiate a real peace. Back in just a minute.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 8:20 a.m. WCPT Willow Springs.
Attorney Bowser?
WCPT 820.
Attorney Bowser? Is Attorney Bowser still there? Is Attorney Patillo still there?
Attorney Bowser just dropped off.
Okay. Is Attorney Patillo still there?
And Dr. Holden is still there, and Attorney Patillo.
Oh, they love to listen to the show.
Yep.
She's up in Michigan. And Attorney Patillo, you want to jump in here and talking about Ukraine and the gas prices with Dr. Wolf? You're more than welcome to. Oh, I know you've got something to say. Ooh, this is a whole lot. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad. I had to take you for the whole show today. Yes. So happy that you're back, Robert.
And then caller Renee just dropped.
She just dropped. Renee, would you call back, please? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What'd you say?
I said it's good to be back until Reverend kidnapped me again.
You know he's going to do that. You know he's going to do that. Bless his heart. He was out in the rain, and his voice was gone yesterday. He was like, "Oh, I'm fine." And I said, "No, you're not. Your resistance is low." And I just, he's just going to keep on pushing. I don't mind that. It's just, you got to make some sense. If I did that, he'd have a fit. And I am much younger than my dad. So there we go. But I'm glad to be with you today, Robert. And I really hope that you had I hope that, was it a good trip?
Oh, absolutely.
Dr. Wolf is ready.
We made some great progress.
Okay, fantastic. Dr. Max Wolf?
One more time.
Oh, Dr. Max Wolf? Dr. Wolf? Paging Dr. Wolf. Dr. Max Wolf. Hello, hello, hello. Dr. Wolf.
I'll check him again.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
I'm here. I'm here. It's just I was on mute.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the most brilliant thing you said on
the
mute.
phone.
Well, you know what? I've got Dr. Robert. I've got, Attorney Robert Patillo. He was commandeered just like you have been, but you went away for a couple of weeks, and
Good
so
morning,
did he. And I'm back, Robert, and I've never gone 2 weeks without speaking to you. What?
That was like a weight lifted off your shoulders.
No, that's not true. Stop it. Just stop.
Well, it's good to be back, and nice to join you this morning, Robert.
Well, this is this is your segment, but I held him over because we were just talking about Jussie Smollett, and people have been calling about that, but people also are very concerned about the gas prices. Period. That's it. That's all.
Gas, but I think gas has been gas has really spiked more than some other things.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is, everything has got everybody wound up.
Yeah, I mean, gas I think is up like 40% year over year, so that's pretty big, right? So if you were paying, $2, you're basically paying just shy of $3. If you weren't paying $2, you're probably paying more like $2.50, and now you're paying $4. I mean, obviously, Chicagoland also has fairly elevated gas prices, even without any perturbance. And the other thing that's sort of interesting is there's no increase in demand. So, they never tell you that in these television coverage on the gas prices, but that's all kind of increase. That's all price increase, right?
Well, what they tell you is that people are still getting gas. People are still buying milk. People are still buying bread, even though inflation. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? You sound like a nut. Stand by. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. You know what time it is. We have missed you. Dr. Max Wolf, Attorney Robert Patillo's been out of pocket too, but you've been gone for quite a minute. We have missed you, we've missed you, Attorney Robert Patillo, and we've really missed you, Dr. Max Wolf, really an economist. As we talk about Ukraine, as we talk about first, these rising gas prices, and which you said, wait a minute, and I said this at the beginning of the show. Look, this did not just start with this current conflict that we're in. We've had rising prices, and we've had rising gas prices. Explain to me, what are we looking at here? Because this is going to change the way a lot of people are living. If they're going to be able to drive to work, if they're going to be able to get to work, this is a lot.
Yeah. So look, I think the gas and oil industry is in a kind of an odd time. We're dependent on them. They feel, as little social benefit that they need to deliver as anyone does who's literally killing off all life on the planet. Their kind of backstory. And they're not investing in producing anymore. They're not drilling for more. They're not looking for more. They're not refining more. They're enjoying making as much money as they can off of the gas demand, which is still pretty high, but which I think a lot of people think is going to fall because of the enormous investments and announcements around EV, electronic vehicles, and electric cars, and just because it's hard to find a community that wants to host a cancer cluster, and so it's hard for them sometimes to get new facilities. And it's also difficult and expensive to look for oil and gas reserves, right? And so you're in a situation here where we rely on this industry. It is very important. We do need them. We will need them for quite some time, so tens of years probably. We'll need less, hopefully, because if we continue at or above the pace of burning fossil fuels we are, we'll all be dead, which will cut into our oil and gas demand quite a bit. But we're going to still need a lot of motor fuels for a while, right? And so I don't think this group feels loved, and I think they're happy to get a higher price for what they have to sell. I would also say that we've politicized this debate in ways that don't make any sense. This is a global phenomenon because people slashed the amount of production they did all over the world in the downturn. And then with a bunch of assistance, there was a bit of a resurgence of the economy. And if there was no more production,
then anything that you couldn't increase production as quick as demand shot up, there was price pressure. And that's probably particularly true in a few areas that people are really sensitive to, which is sort of gas and motor fuel prices and food. And unfortunately, those are the two areas where we've seen, 30, 40% year-over-year price increases of late. It has nothing to do with, really, to be honest, Trump or Biden, right? It's just the phenomenon doesn't come from there. It's always ironic to me that the same people who hate government do blame government when gas prices go up, even though no president, at least since the Second World War ended, has set the price of gas.
Is there anything that can be done to, it seems, are we looking at price gouging?
It's hard to say that in a blanket. I'm sure there are some examples of price gouging. I'm not sure anything that's being done is unlawful, if that's what you mean.
No, I mean, I'm not even looking at the law. I mean, it's because it just seems wrong. I don't care what the law says. I mean, slavery was legal, right? I mean, a lot of things have been legal, but they've just been wrong.
True. I mean, look, it was pretty illegal to sexually assault your partner if you married them until pretty recently, too. Look, obviously, things change, and for the better sometimes. So just being legal doesn't mean it's ethical, for sure. My point is that there's again, it's a little bit like COVID to me. This is a time to talk about mass public transit, because if individuals are completely reliant on private motor vehicles that are borderline or unaffordable, which was true before this happened, by the way, and that becomes very expensive, and then gas and oil is very, very expensive, and you're putting people at the whims of global speculators and global tyrants, because that's where we get a fair amount of our oil. And that's an uncomfortable position to be in. And one partial way to insulate us from that, which also increases our equality and social access and decreases our emissions, is to have a significant investment in fast, safe, clean, reliable public transit.
I want you to call me.
It might be a time to talk about that, too.
Please, because this can be a game-changing moment. But in the meantime, you have people going to be very, very inconvenienced. I mean, think about not just your gas price. I mean, not just the gas in your car. I mean, we use gas for our homes. I mean, there's just we're being assaulted on every side.
Hot water.
Right?
Yeah, cooking, heating, hot water. I mean, there's a lot to come. And look, also, we're in the early phases of what promises to be an extremely cruel, brutal, and possibly long conflict here. So we're also not somewhere deep into this, sadly. I mean, I certainly hope it would end soon, but it would be hard to forecast that that's likely.
And let me bring up Robert Patillo, because Robert has a really fantastic radio show on WAOK, the iconic talk radio station down in Atlanta. And every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time, I urge you to give it your support, because it's really a great show. Robert Patillo, what are your listeners saying? What have they been saying about, the rising gas prices, the rising food prices, just particularly gas, because that's immediate, and you're in the South, everybody has a car. Max and I are up north, and Max is in New York. They don't even need cars up there, but they don't, that's not what they do.
Things do get trucked into everyone, for the record. So, I mean, everybody pays the higher fuel prices, but yeah, we don't fill our gas tanks, and that is why people care about gas, because it's visceral. They pour that money in that hole every week.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, in the South, not only does everybody have a car, but everybody has an SUV, usually a pickup truck. I grew up where we drove the car to the mailbox at the end of the driveway to get the mail and come back. So, the gas prices hit very differently down here. And I think the primary issue that most people are realizing is just how unsustainable this model is. We've been going into countries having oil-based wars for the last 50 years. Every couple of years, we're doing some kind of intervention in some oil-based petroleum-based economy, and quite frankly, we need a permanent solution. The Republican solution is quote-unquote energy independence at home, meaning drill on federal lands, kill all the polar bears, pollute all the waterways, etc. And I I think that this will be a great time for Democrats really to hit the ground running and say, this is why we've been pushing the Build Back Better plan. This is why we want to invest in electric charging stations. This is why we want to put the infrastructure in place to be able to switch to an all-electric power grid. This is why we want high-speed rail travel between cities, because that's a lot more energy efficient than airplanes and long-range trucking. So they can really be making the case for their plan right now. And I think that they're really missing the opportunity. This is the time to double down on the things that you say you want to do when the American people will actually be amenable to it. If you remember, much of Obama's environmental regulations, which led to the creation of or the proliferation of the electric car industry, was really in large part based off of things that came out of that first Obama term. Well, guess what? Gas prices were $4 a gallon then, and he was able to push much of this legislation through because public opinion was in favor of it. So if Biden, let's say, took the idea, remember cash for clunkers during the recession, where they said if you had an old car, you can come turn it in for a more fuel-efficient car in order to get those on the road. You could do that again. Right now, it's been over a decade. You could say, look, you bring in your 20-year-old plus vehicle, we will give you a credit towards buying a brand new electric vehicle. Because the petroleum market is a speculation-based market, just by taking that demand out of the system, you're going to lower gas prices, because once they see that the U.S. is investing billions of dollars into getting electric vehicles on the road, the speculation in the market will drive down the prices. You'll panic it. So there's things that can be done, but you need the proper political leadership to lens this for the public, because right now the Republican lensing is just drill, baby, drill, and that'll get us out of it. And I think that's exactly what the fossil fuel industry wants, to keep us addicted to this cycle for another 50 years.
Let me bring up Noel. Noel, you have some ideas about this particular crisis. What's going on?
Good morning, Ms. Jackson. How you doing?
It was great hearing your voice.
Yes, I was paying attention to the congressional spending bill that was passed recently, and they sent $40 million to Venezuela for voting-related issue. I wanted to know why they're not sending that money to places like Georgia, Arizona, where polling stations are being closed for them to pay the polling workers and purchase new polling machines.
So now your question is what, Noel?
Okay, they sent $40 million to Venezuela for the election-related issue. So Congress passed a bill, and then they sent $40 million to Venezuela. But they don't have no money for a voting machine in Arizona and Georgia, and they are closing polling places because they have no money. I mean, I don't understand that.
Oh, priorities. Anyone want to take a crack at that?
I think that I'm pretty sure that was a thank you, because Arizona and Georgia have learned how to conduct elections from Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, which is first you announce you won, then you let a bunch of people go to a place and wait in long lines and be photographed by the police, and then they push levers on a broken machine, and then you announce a 97% victory margin. Coming soon to a polling place near you.
We've had that already.
I'm waiting for the guy with the courage and the self-love to announce that he got more than 100% of the vote. That's the guy I want to follow. No, but on a serious note, a lot of money is being spent to suppress people's votes there. So the story that we don't have the money is not true. We have the money. We spent it on making sure that people who wouldn't vote for the Republican Party in those states weren't allowed to vote, which is why polling places are not closed uniformly in the state, right? Look at who the Secretary of State is and who runs the state government, and look at the polling places getting closed or amalgamated or moved around, and you'll see a pattern, because if people don't know where to vote, or they've always voted at the school near them, and then they show up there and it's moved, you can win a close election, right? And Arizona, as we all probably recall, in Georgia, were nail biters in a recent presidential election. I mean, unless you live on the other side of the mirror, in which case Donald Trump won 600% of the vote in both places, except for the space aliens who voted for Joe Biden or whatever belief you have. But they were very close, according to us mortal terrestrials who are hung up on the vote count. And so probably there's an interest in making sure that they're not so close, or that they break into the other column, right? So in other words, like a very interesting thing is happening here, right? We're seeing a party pretty much come out into the light and say, look, we're going to need to change who's allowed to vote to win. And don't worry, guys, we're committed to those changes.
Well,
but I don't think it's a lack of resources.
Yeah.
I think it might be something else going on.
Well,
I mean, there are plenty of issues about spending, but I think this one is a little bit maybe cut from different cloth.
Well, I think America has always had an issue with minoritarian rule. I mean, that's the way of the world, right? I mean, monarchy to oligarchs. I mean, it's not like we have a federally protected right to vote. It's not like we have always wanted everybody to vote. It's not like we want everybody to vote today. 49 of the 50 states have enacted voter suppression laws over the past couple of years. I mean, this is a mess.
The only place I disagree with you is I think the majority of Americans of all political parties do want.
No, Americans do, but the power structure does not.
Sure.
And until Americans take the reins of their government, since it's a government of, for, and by them, they are going to continue to enact laws that are going to oppress the 99% of us. We're the ones who have to push back. Americans do. Because when Americans find out all of this malfeasance, they go, wait a minute, I don't like this. But then you do have a group of Americans who are like the royalists of 200 plus years ago. These people did not want to be away from the Queen. They wanted to be colonists, and they wanted to sit on top of everybody else. And you have a group of people who are still minoritarian here, who absolutely want to sit on top of everybody else. We don't need a majority. We don't care how many people vote. We won. They say it's not who votes that counts, it's who counts the votes. This is awful. This is just awful. 49 of 50 states, Max and Robert, voter suppression laws. In New Hampshire, come on now. They don't want students to vote in New Hampshire. That's what they're doing. This is awful. I mean, so just very quickly, how do you think this conflict in Ukraine is going to impact gas and just how we live, Max?
Yeah, so I think it's a very big war. I think people have sort of failed to fully grasp it, right? First of all, this is a testimony in privilege and imbalance, right? So you have a 22-year dictatorship in Russia, a country written off by a lot of people that doesn't have a lot of power left. And you have an old guy, probably in cognitive decline, with all kinds of potency panics, slaughtering other people en masse without even much of a pretense. And I think you're starting to see, at least in places where the news media functions to some extent, the balance of public opinion really pushing to the Ukrainian side, but the balance of military force certainly on the Russian side. And I think the world is also getting a disturbing lesson, which is Ukraine gave up its nukes. And basically the world says, yes, it's horrible. Yes, they're slaughtering civilians. Yes, they bombed the children's hospital yesterday. Yes, no one knows exactly why this guy needs or wants to take over his neighboring country, but his pretenses are thin. The fact that there's a Nazi conspiracy led by the only Jewish person ever elected in either country seems a little bit distant. So it's not clear what the objectives are other than aggrandizement and securing his place in the history of his own imagination. But that level of privilege and the suffering it entails, I think it could be the cause of the moment. And I think you're seeing people get upset about it in South Asia and South America and pay attention to it. I think you're starting to see young men from all over the world start to try to go to Ukraine to fight. So I think this could easily spill across its borders. And also remember, there will be thousands or tens of thousands of troops on a hot border between NATO and Russia within days, where Article 10 compels us into a potential thermonuclear confrontation, and that could occur at any time.
Well, but it's interesting.
So
the global South is still pushing back against this. They are wary of the reasons and the reasoning for this. I mean, when you go through Africa, when you go through Asia, which is where most people in the world are, there is still there not just hesitation, there are questions. There are questions. Stay right there, because Robert, I want you to jump in here. And then, Max, I want you to wrap all of this up for us.
Absolutely. I think the reason you're seeing more recalcitrant from the global South is that most of those countries have been through very similar things to what Ukraine is going through. And there was nowhere near this amount of international sympathy. There was nowhere near this amount of global outrage. What is the difference between what's happening in Ukraine and what America did in Iraq? What's the difference between what's happening in Ukraine and what China is doing to the Uyghurs and Xinjiang? I think that in many ways, this is being seen as another case of media and white privilege, because now they can take this country because, as many reporters have accidentally said in Freudian slips, because this is a civilized white European country, that now this is somehow more important than what's going on in Syria at this exact moment, or what's going on in Yemen at this exact moment, or what's going on the African continent at this exact moment. So let's make sure that these things are clear and fair and even across the board. That we're going to be in condemnation of Putin. We also have to be in condemnation of George W. Bush. That we're going to be against the bombing of hospitals in Ukraine, but we also have to be against the drone strikes on wedding convoys in East Africa. So I think the international community outside of the Europeans and the Americans very much see this as an inflection point. That will this be the moment that Europeans have to finally come to the table and say we are no longer allowed to simply invade our neighbors, regardless of where they are on the earth, in order to enforce this rigid 19th century version of foreign policy and hard power, and rather that we move towards a place of democratization that actually upholding the values that the UN and NATO have been sworn to uphold. So when it comes to having an actual solution to this, I think we're going to have to get through the media spin. Whenever the media starts talking about madmen and things like that, that's usually when my antennas go up that, yeah, they're trying to start a war somewhere. And actually look at what the issues are that Putin is having with the Ukrainians. Yes, they're infested with Nazis. That's a real thing that is going on in the Ukraine. That does not justify invading Ukraine, but they definitely have a Nazi infestation that I think we should probably take a look at. Is Ukraine passing anti-Russian laws? Yes, they basically outlawed the Russian language for the 1/3 of the population that are ethnic Russians in 2019. I can see that being an issue for Russians. Does Russia have an issue with NATO expansion eastward to their borders? Well, you could say, well, what do you have to worry about? And then the Russians will say, well, we have to worry about World War II when we had a non-aggression pact with you Europeans and you invaded. We have to worry about 1813 when Napoleon said he wasn't going to invade, and next thing you know, he shows up in Moscow. So we have legitimate concerns. So instead of talking about these things in this almost comic book version of foreign policy, this Avengers version of foreign policy that
including the U.S. and in Hungary and in the rest of the world. So this is the kettle in the pot here, whatever's going on in Ukraine, and they have that history for sure. But I mean, a history of having some white supremacy, if that's a grounds for invasion, you better batten down the hatches in Georgia.
You better batten down the hatches in the United States because we do that too. I mean, wait a minute. Who was on the side of the South Africans? We could not. I mean, when Mandela was president of South Africa, he was still on the U.S. terrorist list. No one has been more supportive
people
of
didn't want to
right-wing, white
That's what I'm saying,
supremacist, white supremacy than the United States. It's a betrayal of
And Russia
our
has not
of
been.
our foundings. And I'm just saying, I'm sick of all the imperialists. I'm sick of and the supremacists. I'm sick of it all.
But
Sick
I
of it
think a
all.
lot of the world is.
Yeah, I mean,
think a
so
lot of the world
yeah.
is. And Ukraine is like, let's figure something out Americans don't often get. Ukraine is very poor. Okay, so before this conversation, I wanted to check. The average Ukrainian earns about half as much in a year as the average South African, and less than half as much in a year as the average Mexican. So these countries are quite poor. They are white, okay? And people look blonde hair and blue eyed or whatever. But I think that some folks in the global South and globally, not everyone has racialized class as much as we have in the U.S., right? So the Ukraine is a poor country. It's small. It had almost no military to speak of. So the idea that it's a threat to Russia is a little bit like when we invaded Grenada, right? The Ukraine is maybe a threat to the Russian sense of pride or history, but it's, their little country of 40 million was not going to invade the country of 150 million next door with half the world's thermonuclear weapons, which the Ukraine gave up there, right? So the Ukraine was not a threat to Russia. It is not a threat to Russia, right? Everyone's surprised they could defend themselves for 2 weeks. That's a good sign that you're not that much of a threat to your neighbor, right? Where the rubber meets the road. But I think the poorer country, which this is, which has been invaded and exploited by its neighbors, standing up to their aggression is a story that resonates
30 seconds
South for a lot of reasons, and those are mostly autobiographical.
It does, but what the global South has racialized, and it's not that the global South did it. They understand white supremacy when they see it, and they see this also as a white fight. Now, mind you, people all over the world very quickly absolutely feel that the invasion of this weaker nation by the stronger nation is wrong, but they also want to talk about the reasons behind it, and they want to end supremacy. Period. All this is just. All of this. Stay right here, everybody, on the Santita Jackson Show. Well, hold on. I got to get off the air, but stay right here. We're going to continue this conversation for a couple minutes.
Howdy, WCPT fans.
Matt
It's me, Scott
Cummings. I am
Silverman,
so
your old
sorry I
school
didn't get a chance to
Livermore
thank you
guy.
on the
And I really
air
don't know
today.
where this world is heading.
And my
Ukraine was
Mike
invaded
Mercado
last month.
and
Two
Matt.
Republican congressmen actually spoke at a white nationalist conference.
Hang on. Yep, I had to pull you off. Okay, I'm all set. I got to run in and go flip back in the back, but you guys are good to go. Keep going if you want.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for everything.
If you're looking to buy,
Yep, no problem.
But if you can bring this down,
and
okay.
get you pre-approved, call me at 847.
Yep, I'll be back.
Okay, thank you so much. Max, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was looking at that clock.
No worries. Yeah. Look, clock is king. Clock is king.
Clock is king. Oh, Queen. Hello.
Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. It's a huge wheat production zone, especially also the area around Ukraine and Russia. If those wheat crops fail, they can't be planted because the war is going in 6 weeks from now, then the food prices go higher. And depending on how crazy things get in Russia, the oil prices go higher. But I do think lots of older leftists think this is the Soviet Union, and they're on the wrong side of history, and somehow they missed the last 30 years.
Well, Robert, your response.
That's not what's going on here, right?
I think that's part of it. I think you have a confluence of events, cosmically, politically. I really do. For us not to look at the broken agreements with NATO that NATO had with Russia, I think is wrong. And it's a huge mistake to look at the humiliations that the Russian people have felt down.
With Russia.
Well, I mean, look, let me tell you something. I can tell you in the global South, Russia has a different kind of relationship with the global South, which is part of the pushback. Part of it. And because the global South, no, they still do. Because I'm talking to people over there. They still do. No one likes
Chechnya and Syria was not good for them.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the whole of Africa. I'm talking about the developing world. I'm talking about the global South, who have needed friends to counter the oppression from the Yankees. Okay? And that has been a very, very real thing, because ever since we won our revolution, we have sided with the dictators and the worst of the worst for the past 200 years. That is what we have done. And people are tired of it. They're tired of it, and they're asking questions about it. Even as they want Ukraine to be okay. They want them to have their sovereignty. But the thing is, most of us don't want to go to war over it. We don't. Even though you have some people who are in their pockets who are coming in from all over the world, but everybody's not doing that. At some point, you're going to have a diplomatic solution to this because that is how you resolve war. You don't shoot your way out of a war. You have to have a diplomatic solution, and you literally sign papers on it, and that is that. And we're going to have to make a decision to study war no more. That is in the good book. Reverend Jackson says often, we do best what we study most. We study war. We just threw out COVID relief yesterday. COVID relief. Americans are starving. Americans are hurting. But we gave $782 billion to the military. Are you serious? You throw out COVID relief and you're going to take bread and butter off of the tables of Americans? What? It's not working.
This is a unique moment. I don't disagree with that, but I think you got to see the uniqueness of the moment. So, for one, the sanctions package that was put in place that will be escalated will eviscerate Russia. So it's not clear what's left of Russia here either. They've already lost this war, whatever happens on the ground in Ukraine. And that's going to shift some global power issues in a big way. I also think that Russia is 4 weeks from becoming a vassal state of China and rebalancing regional power.
Sure.
And the Chinese will get the minerals they lost 150 years back, and their empire will extend into Eastern Europe.
Absolutely. Well,
right?
it's Eurasia.
Because there's nothing about, but that changes the world.
But the world has already changed.
Yeah.
They signed a pact with Russia that has no limits, no barriers. They said it. We have to deal with the fact that China is they're not an emerging power. They are real. They are here. And you know what? That is shocking for us to see all these colored people who are running things. We even had to do a reset on the map. We even had to do a reset of the map of Africa because it turns out that all the while, the maps that have been drawn have substantially shrunk Africa. Africa's much bigger, much richer than anyone even knows. Do they have imperialist ambitions, the Chinese? Absolutely. America has too. Everybody gets their turn.
All over Africa.
Yeah, they're all over Africa, and you know what? That Europeans are still there too. Europeans are still there too. Sure. Everybody wants to be all over the place.
Everybody's everywhere, right?
But I'm just saying, let's deal with these Europeans, because when you get to France, you have these Africans who are angry about Europe, about France still having their hands all over their money. The Haitians booed the French president out of Haiti when he went down there after the earthquake 10 years ago. They said, wait a minute, we're still paying you to be free. Get out of here. At some point, we're going to have to understand that people are tired of imperialism and the imperialists who carry out those ambitions. We're tired of it. Tired of it. So you know what? Everything's about to change. Everything's about to change. Everything has changed. It is no longer a unipolar world. America can't just be a ball of shot caller. That's over. And if America does not decide to get just, we're going to get rolled over. And that's what breaks my heart. Because I'm an American through and through. No, I'm an American through and through. And I just want America to be right. Hell, it's taken us, how long did it take us to get an anti-lynching bill? 4,000 plus black people have been lynched in 1619, and we've been here since the 1500s. It started before then. I mean, what is that? What is that? No. No, and it does make me emotional. Absolutely, because I see all of these people playing games. I'm not siding. I'm just going to side with right. That's what I'm going to do. I don't want to see anyone else die in this conflict. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of the death. Nice. It would be just. It would be right. Mothers don't have these children to send them off to become cannon fodder. That's not right. It's not right. Yeah. And somebody needs to push for peace. But I'm watching war porn on the news every single day. They're just excited about, you dropped a bomb here, you dropped a bomb there. And you're always telling me who doesn't need a nuke, but all the nukes are in Europe, and they're the ones who've dropped the bombs. America is the only country that has dropped bombs officially. How dare you? You dropped bombs on colored people, on the Japanese. You didn't drop them on Hitler? You brought the Nazis out of Germany and brought them to South and Central America and the United States. And you know it's true. They helped to power our space
fuel
program.
Air bomb some cities. Look, they did those experiments. They also did fuel air bomb completely civilian areas with 100,000 people dying in a night in Germany too.
Yeah, but you know what?
I think when perturbed, the people are pretty capable of killing each other in vast numbers without even crossing the ethnic divide. I think you're probably seeing that now in Ukraine.
Yeah, of course. Look, you've always had white on white crime. You've always had black on black crime. Most people hurt the people they're closest to. I get it. You know, I mean, World War II was a European war. It was. That having been said, I'm tired of it all. Sick of it all.
War, where the Japanese were pretty harsh.
You know, look, all human beings have the capability of being cruel and brutal. That's why you need God to check you and your brutality and your inhumanity. If you don't believe in God, you need ethics. You need something. You need something, because this stuff is just not right. What we're doing right here, because people, like I said, throughout the global South, and that's much, if not most of the world, they're looking at this and they're going, what is really going on here? That's a problem, because so much mischief has happened in the global South. They know that. We all know that.
I think a lot of people have a sense of refugees and of smaller nations being sort of bossed about or brutalized by bigger, wealthier nations.
It's horrible. But when black people and brown people and yellow people are brutalized, no one talks about it. You don't send CNN, MSNBC, and everybody over there. And shame on them for that. And people have observed that. Anytime you have a former minister from the government of the Ukraine shamefully say, this is bothering me because these are European blonde, blue-eyed people. What? And then you see black and South Asian people being blocked from the buses. Now, they've worked that out. I get it. But there's something going on. And everybody gets tired of it. You're tired. We can't act like that is not true. And of course, you don't want to see the weak, the small vanquished by the strong. No. But there's a larger context in which this is happening, and we're going to have to examine it all. You know, if you don't get to the root of the problem, you're going to continue to grow the fruit of some more problems all the time. How did we get here?
Also, each one of these things creates a counter reaction that can last a long time. There's going to be a generation of people here who are going to be angry and avenging this and that. And if you don't clamp that down pretty fast, it pretty quickly gets out of control.
Check out Libya. You got that all over the world, but we don't pay attention to the global South.
Yeah, or Afghanistan, or Iraq. Unfortunately,
we don't pay attention.
A lot of places.
We don't pay attention. You know, it's all over the world. I get it, but we only pay attention to it when it's in Europe, and that is shameful.
Plus, we don't usually pay much attention in Europe either, right?
We are now.
I'd be careful here. I don't think this is a humanitarian thing, right? There is a humanitarian element, but I mean, Putin's been at war with Crimea, and 20,000 people have been murdered in that war for 7 years. And it was on the news exactly none.
But you know what? We've had hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people genocided throughout South Asia, throughout Africa, and it's never been mentioned at all.
Or gets less press for sure.
No. It does not get mentioned in the American press, Max. At all. Pardon me for speaking up. It doesn't get mentioned at all. At all.
Okay.
At all.
Okay.
I've got to go to Al Jazeera. I've got to go to all these other outlets to hear, and it's only because I have friends in these parts of the world, and then I'll get over to London or somewhere and have dinner with them and find out what's been happening in their country and go, wait a minute, what? You mean to tell me 3 million people were killed in a few months and we didn't hear about that? What? Oh, 9 million? What? In this century?
My point is something different, though, here, right? So my point is that I don't think this is so much about humanitarian outrage. I think real people, okay, they see these things and they have humanitarian outrage, what I'd call like citizens, real people. But I think this is about a regime in Russia that the West looked the other way on for a long time and got more and more nervous about. And this is the sort of like oh my God, now this has to be dealt with, what do we do moment. It's not so much about the humanitarian stuff because, look, there was that angle in Chechnya. There was that angle in Syria. There was that angle in the Ukraine, right? There was that angle in Crimea. There was an angle in the eastern provinces where a lot of people were killed, by the way, by the Russians.
Of course.
Or Russian proxies. And there was a lot of hospitals were bombed, which again, not to say that's ever okay or minor, but hospitals were bombed and schools and all that, right? And there was abductions and there was sexual violence uses, or, act of wars, kind of everything you'd want on your kind of crimes against humanity list. And it got exactly no attention. Even though it's literally the same people, it's Ukrainians.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is, it's horrible, but it's horrible all the time everywhere. And all I'm asking is that all of these tragedies be given equal time, and they're not. And that's a problem.
Yeah, beyond equal time. I mean, there needs to be a serious effort to empower the ways to stop them. Because if you only empower the militaries, which is the way these atrocities are committed, you don't empower the peacemakers. Yes, it would be nice to have fairness and the woe is me and the lamenting, but it'd be nicer to have more of a system to avoid the lamentable wars. Because once you have wars, you do have atrocities, and you always have a disproportionately civilian hurt and wounded and killed count.
But it's a value system that's got to change.
Definitional.
That's right. The value system has got to change. Dr. King said we are headed towards spiritual death if we continue to, choose guns over butter. If we continue to uphold racism, militarism, and materialism, we are headed towards spiritual death, and we are here. And it needs to stop. Everyone, I understand. I've seen the brutality everywhere, and my point is, end it everywhere. I cannot look at the splint in your eye and ignore the log in my own. Oh, it should say the log in your eye and the splint in my own eye, because we're all guilty of it. America is not loved as much as we are feared all over the world, because of the brutal thing we have. Killing Maurice Bishop in Grenada was a horrible thing. It was a horrible thing. Participating in the killing of Patrice Lumumba was a horrible thing. It was a horrible thing. Making America making it intolerable for W.E.B. Du Bois to be in the United States. He died in Ghana. This is a product of the United States of America. As American as he could be, he died in Accra, Ghana on August 28th, 1963, as they were kicking off the March on Washington. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves at how we treat people. Fourth, they continue to add symbols of people who have been lynched. Black people have been lynched at the museum, the Anti-Lynching Museum in Alabama. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves. And I am simply saying that as much as I cry tears for Ukraine, and I cry tears for everybody all over the world. I do not ignore the other 6 continents, and that is what we do. We're guilty of that. It needs to stop. Fake powers, you can label me any way you choose. I present the truth, period. That's it. And I'm not going to cry harder for anyone else than I am for everyone else. If you want to end wars, I don't want an anti-Putin movement. I want an anti-war movement. I want a pro-peace movement, Max. I'm tired of hearing his name. I'm tired of that. I want a peace dividend. I want $782 billion to go to schools and hospitals in the United States, not to the Pentagon. Do I believe in a strong defense? Absolutely. But the strong defense should not create offense. That's the reason we got a strong defense. Because we're offending people all over the world. It needs to stop. It needs to stop. Brutal dictators. Brutal dictators. It's brutal to put these black women in jail because they went to vote. Not jail, prison. Excuse me. Serving 4 or 5 years in prison because they thought that they could vote after they had served their time. That's cruel. That's brutal. It's brutal. It's ridiculous.
Looks like there was a cabinet member who also had a voting record abnormality in the Trump administration there too, right? Meadows. Didn't he accidentally file to vote from like a trailer park in the state?
Almost everybody in the White House had different homes, and they were registered in different places. I mean, come on.
But he was apparently registered in a place that he never lived and didn't have a home.
But they were all living. Oh well, I have a home in.
They got that lady in. That's what they got that woman in Texas on, right?
Yeah, I have a home in Florida. I live in Florida and New York, so I've registered in both places. Who does that? Who does that?
Well, people in New York who are trying to evade their taxes is the big thing here, because Florida has no state income tax.
I gotcha. All I'm saying is all this stuff. It just I'm
not sure it's God's work, by the way. That was.
Come on, Lloyd. Leave Lloyd Blankfein alone, because he is doing God's work. That's what he said, and I'm going. That's his truth, and
I don't
not
think
his
he
truth.
It's not about the Florida tax thing. Yeah, I don't think that's what he was speaking about.
No, of course not. But he said he's doing God's work, and I'm gonna take it. It's his word, and I'm gonna take him at it. But you know what? As you know me, I get really emotional with Max, and he tolerates me. No, I did not live in Florida.
By the way, while we were talking, something, not to interrupt, but while we were talking, they released the BLS earnings summary. It's actually pretty interesting.
Well, tell me.
So real average hourly earnings for all employees decreased 0.8% from January to February, seasonally adjusted. So basically what happened is the wage increases weren't enough to keep up with the price increases. So year over year, wages are down on average. Again, obviously, hourly averages don't speak to everyone's reality by any stretch, but are down about 2.6%. It gives you an idea of why people are upset about food and fuel prices, is because, again, it's always relative. I realize this may sound overly complicated, but what usually gets people upset is food or fuel prices rising a lot when the wages are not. Right? Because if your income's going up too, it's usually easier to bear the price increases for obvious reasons, right? Yeah. So if your income either isn't rising or isn't rising enough, then that's usually where that you really feel the bite in your budget, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, but I'm the fact. Excuse me. The fact is, when you see these, when you see the news commentators who are constantly saying, they're like giddy. Oh my goodness. We're people are still buying, even though. Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute. They have to buy milk. I mean, what are you talking about? People are struggling out here. I know, I know what they're coming by push. People are coming to push for the most basic of needs, Max. I mean, people are literally not eating. Literally. I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's like, are you serious? Oh, gosh. It's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And this is unsustainable. It's unsustainable. Our thinking is unsustainable. It's crazy.
Tough summer.
Well, I think it is going to be tough.
There's a good chance it will.
I think it's going to be tough. I was hoping, wishing, and praying that this would not last forever and a day. And unfortunately,
but even if the thing is, look, a lot of the price increases, which nobody talks about, is we have a massive elective trade war with China because Trump was trying to prove he was tough on China, which dislocated the global supply chain. Then, not his fault, but then we had COVID, which massively dislocated global supply chains, right? And so you have a lot of pressure on these international supply arrangements, and whether people like them all or understand them or not, it's a very global production market. So, like, for instance, when people say, and there's obviously good environmental reasons to oppose it, but when people say drill, baby, drill, there's a global market. If you're drilling stuff, the pollution is local, but the oil is going to the highest bidder. It's getting on a boat. It's not staying here because we don't live in an autarky. So if we pull a lot of energy out of Alaska and it's marketable, it's going to go on a boat, probably go to South Korea, Japan, and China. I mean, it is more total global supply, which pushes down the price, but it's not going to, stay here. Like, I don't know who's out there who thinks this, but I would ask you, when you go to the Exxon or BP or Mobil station or whatever station you fill up at, are you often getting local gas? Have you asked? If you're not,
You know we haven't asked.
Right? You don't know where it's from, and you don't care.
No.
Yes. The point is, why would you assume that if they're drilling there, you're getting it?
Did this come from Venezuela or
Someone
Texas?
told you that in the ad.
Just,
yeah. I'm not saying that necessarily matters. The environmental damage is similar. But if they're drilling near you, all you know you get is the local groundwater pollution. You might get the rest too, and there's a global supply, and if you add to the global supply, it would have a downward price thing. But, in a world consuming 100 million barrels of oil a day, adding a little supply here and there, it might take a while before you spend the 3 years it takes you to save 4 cents from that transaction.
Well, very quickly, before I go, where do you see all of this going? I mean, you said you think that this is going to be this conflagration.
Sorry, I just make sure I understand all of this. Is the price direction or what?
No, just Ukraine. I mean, just where are we going? What's this?
Look, I think the Russians are in a tough situation here. I think their economy has basically been shredded now.
Mm-hmm.
I think they didn't have that much to lose either. So I have a good friend whose name we won't mention, who I think you know too, who spent his career in the intelligence community. And he says that secretly some of these guys are referring to the president of Russia as late Elvis with nukes. Oh. So I think they're trying to it is a little hard to figure out what they're trying to do here, other than his place in history and his sense of himself as the new, smaller Alexander the Great. But whatever happens, there's been a lot of needless suffering and death. Oh. And I think there's a pretty good chance that Russia may become a vassal state of China.
Well, isn't that what that deal was about?
Will change.
Because anytime you sign this kind of, they're heading in that direction, right?
Those deals. Yeah, look, the toilet paper you bought last month has probably got the same shelf life as that deal. So that was just basically Putin trying to push back on the West, saying, "Don't bother to sanction me. There's a new option in town."
Of course.
Right? But even if he could retool that option, it will take him 10 years. And if you do have a new option in town and that option knows you're their only option, they'll give you an even crappier deal than the old option you were running away from. So, yeah, I think I wouldn't. That's probably like your non-aggression pact scenario. I don't know what that's worth. But it is possible that they'll become a vassal state. I think the world is more multipolar. Mm-hmm. So I think for the first time in a long time, it's not unipolar to the U.S. That was really only the last few years, right? But it's multipolar.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think you're going to see a resurgent sort of Germany in Europe, it looks like. Mm-hmm. You're going to see Russia clearly trying to militarily dominate a region, although, before the war, they had 90% the GDP of New York State. They do not have the economic capability to maintain this. Right? They could try and take the North Korea route, but I don't know how that works. So I do think we might see the acceleration. On the plus side, we might see people move more aggressively toward alternative energy, which is actually a plus. This is not how I would want to get there, but that's a plus. I think you're going to see Europe probably have to rearm itself. It's probably overdue, but that changes the balance of power too. I think you're going to see an emergent China possibly here in a way you didn't before. But I think you might see that this is the first cyber war fought in social media. And as much as I know there's an element of sympathies about people who look like you, there is also an immediacy of a war fought live on TikTok, where everybody is seeing the brutality of war with an intimacy, like a change in the knowledge of war, like the Vietnam War was.
And good.
Right? Until they turn that internet off, which they've struggled to do so far, right? This is the cyber and internet war. This is the social media war. It's the first one.
Yeah, and some of it is.
I don't think that's.
I don't know how much of it I trust.
I think the world is. Fine, but the first casualty of every war has been the truth.
Absolutely.
It's just a different medium of lying faster.
Absolutely. And for me.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's more honest.
Yeah,
but it will change people's experience of the war. Okay. Look, everything on TV on Vietnam wasn't true either.
Absolutely.
Right? But killing each other. Animals don't do this stuff. They're better than that. It's probably not even fair to call it animal stuff.
Absolutely.
Probably not fair to animals.
Well, as the song says, which comes from the good book, you want to beat your swords into plowshares and your spears into pruning hooks. You want to study war no more. And that is, my father often says, we do best what we study the most. We study a lot of war. We've eliminated COVID relief from this $1.5 trillion omnibus bill yesterday and put in $782 billion for the Pentagon. Something about our priorities are off, and Dr. King prophesied that a nation that spends more on guns and the military than programs of social uplift is a nation headed towards spiritual death. That is where we're heading. That is what concerns me. And he didn't just mean that about the nation. He
We'll have a
meant
lot
this.
of company on that road.
But it's our world. I mean, this is where we are, and it's got to stop. We have to go another way, go in another direction. That's all I'm asking. For us to go in another direction. But Max, you're going to have the final word before I go and call my mom.
Look, I think it's fair enough. But please say hi.
I
to me as
will.
well. Look, I think it's a chance to ask yourself about the global limit on the expression of hard power here, especially with somewhere between no and a very flimsy justification. And I also think there's a possibility that people don't discuss that this changes the domestic balance of power in the United States, given the intimacy of the Putin government with the rising radical right fringe in the U.S. It'd be interesting to see how that sort of evolves here too.
Well, it's rising everywhere. It's rising everywhere, but so are progressives, so every action merits an equal and opposite
Polarizing
reaction.
world.
Yeah. It's, we're going to have to choose or lose. We have to make some decisions about who we are, not about who we are. We need to, number one, be honest about who we are, but we need to make some decisions about who we really ought to be. And so I thank you, Matt.
Who you're trying to become, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. As a country.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, on the macro and
All right.
micro levels, as individuals and as communities, as a country, as a world, because we are all down here together, period. How about that?
Yeah. And
no, Max?
Agreed. Okay. Well, thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure.
Well, I was waiting for you since I've been boycotted for 2 weeks. That's okay.
Yep. It wasn't successful. You boycotted.
I was boycotted. I was like, when is he coming home? So there we go.
So there's the risk of a boycott. If you boycott, sometimes people realize they don't need the product.
Oh my gosh! Oh, you know what? I'm going to call you when we get off the air. I'm going to get off of here now. But I want we had a crazy day today.
I have a quick 9:30, but I can circle back.
Please circle back with me. Please circle back.
We'll do. All right. Well, thanks for your time. Thanks. It's great to be back on the show. Hope everyone is well. Robert, nice to join you as well.
And he went on, but I missed you, and I'm so glad that you're back. Glad you're back.
Likewise.
Okay.
Likewise.
All right, sweetie. Thank you. All right, everybody. I love you. Ooh, have a great one. Bye-bye.